welcome everyone to the Art of Winning, and welcome Dan. Today, Dan and I are going to talk through the 6-point momentum score scenario. We took the momentum score and we broke it into 6 scenarios. So basically, when you play a match, you're going to find yourselves in one of these 6 scenarios at any time throughout the match. Yesterday, or if you followed us yesterday, we talked about the momentum scoring system, a few specifics. We started really slow at the beginning. So if you still have any questions about how to score it using the momentum score, your matches, or how to track matches using momentum score, please email us or contact us on our Facebook page or through the Art of Winning tennis.com. So again, want to remind you about the artofwinningtennis.com. This is our website. This is a membership website. It is jam-packed with games, challenges, drills. It's got philosophy. We have tons of video about how we talk through about the methodology of the art of winning, why it's the art of winning and not the science of winning, and how the science of winning and the art of winning combined is produces what we do. So, Dan, why don't we get started today with our first question about the 6-point momentum scenarios.
Right. So, Sterling, the first thing I'd ask is, what happens when I win a point?
When you win a point in the momentum score, we count the numbers of consecutive points you won in a row. So basically the score is 1-0, you're up.
Okay. And what happens when I lose a point?
Then the score actually flips to 0-1. So it's not like we're keeping a running tally of the score.
No.
The score wouldn't be 1-1. It would actually go 0-1. Right.
Okay.
Or for you would be 0-1. For me, I would call it out 1-0 because you want to call the momentum score out based on what your number is first.
Yeah. That's quite important, though. It might seem obvious, but yeah.
Well, I say that because in the game score, the server score is always called first. Okay. So even if I was returning serve, I would call the score out, the server score first, 15-30, right? But the momentum score, if I won the last point, the score would be, I would call it out to myself in my head, 1-0 and then 15-30, like that.
Could you do me a favor? Could
Sure.
you bring up the groovy chart there?
There you go.
Right. So when you've won a point, can you see in red there that each one of the scenarios numbered? So when I'm referring to number 1, it's that red number, and that box is the scenario that you're in. Okay. So can we go to when you've won a point? So
that would be scenario 3. You can see the arrows at the top, win. Okay. We're at scenario 3, you or your player, and you're trying to obtain a momentum point. So you're trying to go from winning 1 point to winning 2 points in a row.
Okay, great. And then if we zip across to the losing side.
There you go. Over here to scenario 5.
Yeah.
You have lost a point and you're trying to prevent a momentum point by your opponent.
And you're always moving either right or left. So, for example, if you're in scenario 3, your opponent, by definition, must be in scenario 5.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's quite important. Because sometimes people think, well, scenario 3 refers to both of us. No, it doesn't. It refers to your player.
Right. Now, I want to let's talk about 1 and 2 a little bit, because sometimes we get questions about why is having lost a conversion or having won a conversion the beginning.
Can I just ask if I can ask you my next question? before I jump.
Before we jump. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Scenarios 1 and 2, because scenarios 1 and 2 are really, they're frightening. They're frightening.
Yeah.
Those scenarios.
Okay, we'll stay away from those for a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to scare people off too early, Sterling. It's hard enough getting them on here as it is. Right. So let's say then we've won 2 in a row, and we're in scenario number 4 here. Okay. So we've won a momentum point at that point. Yeah. That's in the bag. We keep the momentum point. So there we are. We're 2-3. Can you tell me about that particular scenario?
So scenario 4 is interesting because what we found in our data over the past years is that it's a lot easier to win, to go from 1 to 2. So scenario 3 is a little bit easier to achieve positively. Scenario 4 is a little bit more difficult. So going from winning 2 points in a row to 3 points in a row can be very challenging. And that's why it's so rewarding. So that's what we found in the data.
Okay. Good. So there we are. That's on the winning side. But Sterling, can we just have a look? Can we sprint to the other side?
Sure.
So let's assume then that we lost 2 points in a row.
Right.
What scenario are we in, and what are we facing here?
So this would be scenario 6. Okay, so we're leapfrogging over. Now, just like scenario 4 is difficult to win, it's difficult to obtain a conversion point, 3 points in a row. It's actually the odds are for you when you're down a momentum point and you're stopping a conversion. You're actually in the driver's seat here, because your probability of stopping a conversion is much higher than your probability of actually winning a conversion. Okay. And there are various reasons for that, and we go into those in other videos.
Okay. So the difference between the right-hand side, so 3 and 4, as opposed to 5 and 6 on the left, do you think that has consequences?
Definitely. Definitely.
Sorry, the leading question of the day. Right, yeah. So then the final 2 scenarios. So can I ask, Sterling, what happens when I have won 3 points?
When you've won 3 points in a row, you have actually obtained what's called a conversion point. This is what we refer to at the Art of Winning as big momentum. Okay. This can either, by winning a conversion, you can either, the obvious sort of thing you think about in your mind is, I'm up 40 love, right? But remember, as we talked about yesterday in the other video on momentum scoring, is that momentum scoring continues through the games. So momentum score doesn't end at the end of the game. The game ends, but not the momentum score. So right. you may go up 40 love, or you actually may win the game because you traded the first couple points and then you win 3 in a row to win the game. Or you can carry that momentum conversion point into the next game, right? So
any one of these scenarios can occur at any point in the game.
Correct. And I kind of sort of divide up the game into 3 sections: the beginning of the game, the middle of the game, and the end of the game. So, for example, the beginning of the game is love all, or 0-0. The middle of the game is 30 all, and the end of the game is 40 all. And then you can kind of start to see how the momentum and conversion points sort of weave their way through the game. But it is quite important. We iterated this yesterday. It's very important to understand that the momentum score carries through from game to game. So when you're taking that changeover at 2-1 or 3-4, just remember what the momentum score is. You're either up 2-0, down 2-0, or 0-2. Maybe you're up 0-3 or you're up 3-0 or down 0-3. If you're playing no ad scoring, there's the possibility of 1-0-0-1 at the end of the game. Okay, so when you start thinking through this, it's extremely interesting how you're going to interpret going into the next game.
And can I ask that question again? Do you think that this has consequences for the outcome of a match and your success as a player?
There is no question about this. It has major circumstances. If you're thinking about it and you're not thinking about it. So if you're thinking about it, it's going to be a major advantage. If you're not thinking about the momentum score, you're basically just playing by emotion, reaction, sort of a general plan of what you'd like to see happen. So that's why we quantified momentum score, or we quantified momentum as the momentum score to address the psychological parts of winning and losing, the psychological effect, if you will.
So could you then tell me, Sterling, why are they called scenarios?
So if you think about the word scenario, it's like a scene, maybe a scene in a play. If you watch a play, right, you have different scenes. So we wanted to sort of look at how the game is, or how the match is moving, and how you move from point to point with a scenario. Okay, so we can look at that specific momentum point score scenario. For example, 1-0-30 all is not the same as 0-2 30 all. And many times if we just think about the game score, it's 30 all. But actually there's 6 ways or 6 scenarios of 30 all.
Yeah.
So that's why we call them scenarios.
What happens without having a knowledge of the scenarios or momentum, would you say, Sterling? What happens with the player and the coach to some extent?
Emotion becomes a big part of the game, like bigger than I believe it should be. It can, even when you have positive emotion, if you have too much, it can hurt you because you're too ramped up. And if you have low emotion or negative emotion, it can affect you in a detrimental way. So I think the momentum score takes away that emotion, or at least it puts it in proper perspective.
Okay. So what do Art of Winning players do when they've learned the scenarios?
The first thing that I've noticed with players that start to use the momentum scoring system is they begin to bring their emotions under control, because now they're using reason and counting to address the situation or the scenario that they're in, the scoring scenario that they're in. Remember, we talked about pressure, and pressure comes from the score. It comes from intrinsically, internally, and it comes from the outside, extrinsically. And what the momentum score does is it addresses the score as what is the reality of what's happening. How many points have you won or lost in a row? And it's the emotions. And quite frankly, I experienced this last night. I've been working with a couple players for a couple of years now. Well, one of them about 9 months and the other one about 2 years. And it's quite interesting. I would sort of interject, hey, you know, and they would turn to me and go, yes, coach, I know what the momentum score is. I know what to do. And I was like, it was so great to sort of sit back, because the momentum score is training them to internally work through, okay, where are they as far as momentum, and what do they need to do next?
I think that's key. And would like to ask then, based on what you just said, what is the psychological effect of working with the scenarios?
The psychological effect is that, first of all, you're, as a player and a coach, you're able to think through clearly what could happen, right? And you start to think through what kind of pattern would work better in this particular scenario. You get away from, like I said, the emotion, and you start to get into probability. You start to understand it's much more difficult to win 3 points in a row than it is 2 points in a row. It's easier to stop a conversion 3 points in a row. And you also see the nuances of the match is actually very close. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of 1-0, 0-1, 1-0, 0-1, right? And that reflects in the game score. It really brings the psychological, the mental and emotional in balance, because a lot of times the emotions are out of balance, and it inhibits you from thinking through clearly what you would like to do next, right? And it becomes a little bit more specific. Well, not a little bit more specific. It's a lot more specific with regards to, you understand the probability of winning and losing because you're working through these scenarios in practice.
So what do you do then to train people in the scenarios?
Okay, so
you've got some games, haven't you?
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I couldn't resist saying that.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes. No, you're right. So we created games like called Deuces Are Wild, Conversions, Tsunami. Those all deal with point momentum. Okay, so Deuces Are Wild is if you win 2 points in a row, you win the game. Okay, serve switches. You get to play maximum of 4 points on your serve. If you can't win 2 points in a row after the 4 points, the serve switches, and it's a wash. So we have all these games and challenges at the Art of Winning in the portals, in the portal momentum scoring system. So there's different portals. There's data analytics. There's momentum scoring system. So that's what I do. I go out and I've created these games and challenges. I continue to create new ones. And I talk to my players about like what would, about creating the games and how do we go about creating something that's realistic and that reflects more closely what you're going to experience emotionally and mentally in a match. Because to me, that's the trick, right? Try to rehearse and practice with the same type of pressure, mentally, emotionally, you might feel on a match court. And until the momentum score came along that you and I worked on, and the games developed out of that, that has been the most effective measure by which we use to literally transform players on the court. I mean, it is remarkable the experiences I've had with players that have come to me and they're extremely emotional. Their parents are like, I can't watch them play anymore. It's just killing me. And within a month, 10 to 12 sessions, completely different player. Racket throwing stops, negative talk stops, negative body language decreases. It is phenomenal. And so I can say without a shadow of a doubt in my mind that this is probably it is the best system that I have ever come across in my almost 25 years of coaching. I'm not saying that because I sort of developed it. I mean, obviously that can be a conclusion by anyone in their brain, but I've used a lot of systems to try to work through the psychological part of the game and help players really rise to the occasion and not succumb to their emotions. This is by far the best system.
And what effect has it had on your players?
well,
I mean,
like
you
I
described
said,
that. You described
yeah,
that very
yeah, like
well.
I said, I mean, it's totally transformed them.
Yeah.
They're so much more calmer. That's a big thing, right? I didn't say that, but they are very calm. They're collected. When they make an error, they just kind of reset. And it's getting better. Like the first time they go out and play in a tournament, it's a little, after the first few weeks they go out and play a tournament, they're still working through it. But then after, 6 months, it's like I talked to my player that she's.
I heard a good phrase the other day that there are two playing fields, and you're trying to win on the wrong one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so in other words, most players want the playing field to be a certain way, but it just isn't.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy I'm starting to use now. Look, this is the playing field, right? It's not. Tragically for you and the rest of the tennis world, the playing field isn't the game score. It's the momentum score. This is where the matches are won. And I think, to a certain extent at least, Sterling, that your players are calmer because they're in tune. They're on the right playing field.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're not conscious of it, you're on the other playing field thinking that this is happening, and it gets really frustrating. Why do I go ahead and not win the game? That's the complaint you get all the time tactically from players. They're so frustrated. I go ahead all the time, Dan, and then suddenly, I give it all away again. And if you understand momentum, you're going to understand why that's the case. And you can see the momentum players doing that.
It's very interesting. And you said, what do you do with your players on court now? The momentum score begins to frame your practice in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Before I used the momentum scoring system, I would go out, we would work on the player's serve or the forehand or the backhand. Maybe we'd work on some patterns and sequences and things like that. But we weren't scoring it. There was no pressure from the score because we weren't scoring. We were just working through it, and great shot. That's a great pattern, way to react well. But the score is very interesting because it induces a pressure that's completely different from intrinsic and extrinsic. It's almost like a non-biased pressure.
Yeah.
But it produces this anxiety in a player that they must learn to negotiate with that. Okay? Because it's there for both players. And sometimes players, here's another thing. I've seen players that I've worked with who began to understand that the pressure of the score was they're not only feeling that themselves, but their opponent is also feeling the same pressure. And so there's this realization of, I'm not the most important person on court anymore. It's actually, I've got to relate to my opponent. My opponent I'm not playing Federer, like cool, calm, collected, and I'm a basket case. No, I'm playing someone that's of my mindset and level. Okay. So they're experiencing the same types of feelings and emotions and anxiety that I do, or excitement. And so the momentum score begins to help you get into that flow of negotiating the score, right? And then you begin to understand how the momentum points and conversion points put you over the top because you're counting.
Can I, before we close, what's been a brilliant description of the scenarios, to me, from the Art of Winning from our 12 principles, the principle, I think it's number 5, that the player who is ahead will play worse than the player who's behind, which I think, to me, is a very acute thing for competitors, and if they don't understand this principle, and it gets them really, really frustrated. And they kind of beat themselves during a match because they don't understand that with momentum scoring, the more you win, the less likely you are to win the next point. Because players, and look, there are a number of reasons, and we've been researching this for a long time. There are a number of reasons why the player who's behind is going to play better. But I think the belief, or certainly the perception of competitive tennis players and of coaches, is the other way round. That if you're behind, you might, become defeatist, and you'll be an emotionally down. And I think that's true of Americans, possibly more than British, who are miserable most of the time anyway. But the point I'd make is that principle in itself is very closely tied to the scenarios. That's why there's a calmness that when they do go behind, there's a knowledge that my chance of winning the next point, no wonder they're calmer, right?
Yeah.
So if they lose a point, there's the emotion of losing it, but that's very quickly countered by the momentum calculation that ahead isn't ahead in terms of probability. I've really made that rather complicated. Can you?
No, not really. I mean, I think that the point is that a player that understands it's much more difficult to maintain the momentum than to disrupt the momentum.
Yeah.
And the momentum score is there to help you realize that. Because otherwise, if you don't have a scoring mechanism to harness momentum, then you're just going by the feeling of momentum. I feel like I have the momentum. I feel like I've lost the momentum. Now you're succumbing to the emotions. So if you start losing a game and then you lose the next 2 points of the next game and you're not keeping momentum score, you think you've lost 7 points in a row when the reality is you've only lost maybe 2 momentum points and maybe you've won a momentum point. But because you're only thinking, we get lost in the past.
Yeah.
And we get stuck in the past. And it's like short points. We don't realize the score is actually flipping back and forth. The momentum score is flipping a lot more than we think it is, because we're stuck in the past and we're thinking about that game we just lost because we lost the last 3 points of the last game, or we double faulted twice, right? So the momentum score harnesses that elusive concept of momentum, right? We see this in other sports too. We see that we make a joke in America football. We say they play the prevent defense. So when a team's really ahead, like 2 or 3 touchdowns, and they get into the fourth quarter, and you see the defense start dropping back to avoid the long play and the comeback from the other team. So they drop back, and they call that the prevent defense. And we make a joke. We say that's preventing them from winning, like maintaining and their lead. And it's true, because they drop back, and then the other team just hits short passes and short large, and then they score on these little short sort of yardage plays. Well, that's like tennis, right? I mean, we remember the long rallies, and we remember those momentous, heartbreaking, break point opportunities, instead of having something like the momentum score to keep us on track of, okay, I've lost a point, I lost another point, they were very short rallies, okay, I'm in this fight. And it's crazy because I'll actually create scenarios on the court to try to get anomalies to happen in the data, and the patterns still work themselves out.
It's hard, yeah.
It's very difficult to just try to produce anomalies. And especially with these 2 players I've been working with, we were on court last night, and they began to see, okay, one won a conversion point, and the other answers with a conversion point, and then the other player answers with another conversion point, which goes along with the universal truth. You know, the best time to win a 3 in a row is after you've lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, can we just focus in on that, Sterling? I know it's not in the question I originally asked you, but there are features of this chart. May I just point one of those out?
Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're in scenario 3, we're moving from 1 to 2. You'll find that players will try and clone the previous point.
Yes.
Where they won.
Okay.
That's definitely a feature of 3.
So they try to clone what happened from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
At 2 to 3. So whatever happened in scenario 3, however they played the point, maybe they hit a winner down the line. If they see that same situation come up in scenario 4, they try it again and clone it, and it almost always fails.
Well, cloning will happen. So, for example, if they were in scenario 5 where they're at 1 point down, yeah, and then they won the next point, so it puts them into scenario 3.
Ah, yes, okay.
That's when they can clone. I mean, they can clone in scenario 4 as well, but cloning is a feature of the right-hand side.
Got it. Okay.
That's one thing that I think you will start to notice when you use the scenarios and get used to momentum scoring. Is there a tendency that you've seen, Sterling? And I've got my eye on 1 and 2 there.
Yeah, so here's what we witnessed last night. And remember, these are players that have been with me at least 8 months. So they know what's coming, and they still can't stop it.
Yeah.
It's crazy because unless they really pay attention, and junior players, their minds are going to wander. So it's a battle. Having lost a conversion, the best time, which is 3 points in a row, you just lost 3 points in a row. The best time to win 3 points in a row is right after that. Okay, because you've lost a conversion. Think about this. You've lost 3 points in a row. Unless you just check.
Right, can I ask you a very quick question on that,
Yes.
Sterling? And it's a leading question.
Okay.
Has every match that you've ever studied that includes momentum reached the conclusion or shown that the best time to win a conversion is after you've just lost one?
I would say it happens about 80% of the time in my data. Okay. 80 to 90% of the time.
Would you also say that?
Because I have seen some many battles happen, and then a conversion is won, but then almost 80% of the time a conversion is won right back after that.
Okay, so these are two particular patterns that you can start to see when you're using momentum scoring and you're using the scenarios. And I think it's important. I mean, look, there are lots of them, and they are really exciting. A third one I would say would be to look at your ability to prevent your opponent getting a conversion.
Yes.
Or a momentum point is considerably more likely than it is for you to gain a momentum or conversion point. So winning on the left is easier than winning on the right.
Correct. And so let me say this too. This is something that I've started to notice and pick up on. When you have won a conversion point, your emotions are pretty high, right? You're pretty confident at that point, right? I've got the momentum. I've got big momentum. Your opponent wins the next 2 points in a row. So they get a momentum point right after you win 3 points in a row. It's almost like that. Instead, you're in scenario 6 right now. So you're trying to prevent a conversion point by your opponent. So a conversion back to back.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen in my players' heads, right? Because I've asked them questions about this, and it's almost universally true. They go into that next point, scenario 6, and they're thinking, man, I had all that momentum because I won 3 in a row, and now they're about to do it back on me. They're about to win 3 points, and it's going to nullify all that hard work I just did. That's why they lose the conversion point. That thinking right there causes them to get off focus of knowing that actually they're in the place of advantage. They're down 2 points in a row.
Yeah.
So it's like you said before, it's flipping that mindset that when you're behind in the score, you're actually in a good place to win the next point, because it's much easier to break or disrupt momentum than it is to sustain it. And the reason why we have a hard time sustaining conversions back to back to back is because we just get too loose. We don't understand that we're actually in a place of danger, because it's much harder to start continually win multiple points in a row. We've seen this on the tour, where we just watched this in the Australian Open 2020, where Federer reels off 7 points in a row, and then he ends up losing 5 in a row right after that. So that was 2 conversions by Federer and then a point. And then he loses a conversion and a momentum point, and then finally breaks Millman's momentum after that. But tennis is this trade-off. And so if you can stop these trade-offs of conversion and momentum points, you can win the match. No question about it.
That's I think a really good summary of the scenario, Sterling. And I'd like to conclude by saying that this is this is so powerful momentum scoring that you will be able to immediately improve your players' results, or if you're a player, improve your own results by studying this. It's not a question of you have to study it all over 6 hours, right? 10 minutes of putting into practice, even moving from 1 to 2 points, getting momentum points, and practicing a game like Deuces Are Wild, which is quite straightforward,
right,
will really, really help you. Okay, it's not the case that you have to have the whole degree, the whole PhD in momentum scoring. Start now. Ask us questions. We're here for you 24/7 ish. And I
want to say one last thing about coaching too. As coaches, you begin to grasp this momentum scoring system. Now your eyes are open to see the things that you really need to work with on your player, right? Instead of this guessing game, guessing what's actually happening with your player in their head and with their emotions. Like I got away from actually having to discipline my players with their emotions. I don't even discipline them anymore. I don't have to.
That is really interesting.
It is interesting because
since I've been working with you, I don't think, I've raised my voice or had that, oh, why don't they listen to what I'm saying moments? Yeah, right. It just doesn't happen.
Like they just don't get it. No. The momentum score takes care of that. It helps them get it on their own. And after all, as coaches, do we not want to create independent thinkers? Absolutely, right? And so this frames the discussion between you and your player. And it holds both the coach and the player accountable to their own emotions. Holds the coach to their emotions, holds the player to their emotions.
The logic of it is beautiful. There is a beautiful logic to this. It's coherent. It's that's why it's the art of winning. This is art. We're using we're using the science, and that's it. So when you're underperforming, when you're performing, that's what you do. That's what you call upon.
So as a wrap up, just what we've talked about today, the 6-point scenarios are valuable because they show you as a player and they show you as a coach where the player is actually at within the game. Okay? Because like I said, there's 6 different point scenarios for 30 all. Right? And then if you do the other scores, right? I did a master chart. We won't talk too much about it, but there are actually 17 game scores that are possible. Love 15, 15 love, and so on. There are
that is awesome, and we're going to leave that as a teaser because
but there are many more. There are many more momentum score scenarios than 17. There's not 17 possible. When you're just talking about game score, it's 17. But when you talk about
even studying one of them right now, just one scenario, what happens? Because by studying one, you are actually studying 2 scenarios simultaneously. Right. So the duality to it. But you know what you were talking about, Sterling, with with point score and momentum being combined and looking at probability.
Yes,
you're not that far away.
No, and it does end. There is a finite number of scores. There are a finite number of score scenarios, but there are greater than 17. And there's psychological consequences to each one of those. And there's patterns that happen between all of them. And once you start to recognize the patterns, you're able to monitor your emotions in a productive way. And you do this by rehearsing it on the practice court so that you become much more intuitive on the match court in your competitive play.
Okay.
That's it. Why don't you talk to us, Dan, about where we're going to go next, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. So what I was going to do is actually the next session will be looking at patterns. So we've looked at the metrics now and how we gather data. But what are we actually doing when we've got that data sheet in front of us? What are those patterns that we're looking for? What tends to happen, and so on? Because I'd like to be able to pass your experience on to Art of Winning members and subscribers here, Sterling. You know, in your experience, what are those patterns, and when and how do they occur? And more importantly, how is it that we can address the challenges that are thrown up by what we can see in that data chart? Is that okay?
Absolutely. So again, if you want to become a member, we have a 7-day trial period for $1. Go to theartofwinningtennis.com and you can watch videos. You can go through the trial membership, you have full access to all the portals. It's a lot of information. And but I would start, pick a portal, go for it, one that maybe already interests you. We have the First Strike Builder portal. We have the Momentum Scoring System portal. We have data analytics. So lots of resource there. If you have any questions or comments about what we talked about today with the 6-point scenario, please put a comment if you're watching via the Facebook page, The Art of Winning. And if you want to be a member of that community, just email us or just go on and ask to be invited in. We'll let you in. And that's it. So have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.